everybody. Welcome to the training, learning, and development community. Happy Friday to all of you. Thanks for joining us today. Well, our guest today is Kim Lindsey. She's a senior learning experience designer over at our friends at Cinecraft. And we're talking about writing for instructional design, specifically shop floor training. And this one came up, I think it was maybe last week when we were having a TLD cast, and Kim had started sort of posting about this in chat, and Joe Cook, who's in the audience now, was enthusiastically recommending that we have this conversation to talk about it. And it's good to, we've been doing a lot of stuff about more kind of career focused topics on TLDC, so it's great to get back to something that is a little bit more focused on instructional design, practicing and that type of thing. So Kim, thanks for joining us today. And let's get started. You have some slides.
I do have some slides.
Yes. So if you can bring those up. And I want to mention, everybody,
okay.
At the bottom of the screen, you'll see there's an ask a question area. If you have any questions at all, feel free to add them to the ask a question area. We'll go over those questions during the session, so please feel free to add those. I added a few myself, and so I'll let you take it away, Kim.
Okay, well, thanks, and thanks everybody for being here. As those of you who know me know, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I come from a blue collar background, and my dad was a machinist. And then I spent my only degrees in zoology, and from there I went into hospital laboratory work, which is, even though you have to have a degree and it's very important work, but it's essentially a blood test factory. So I did that for 17, 18 years. I also worked in an actual factory in one of my college jobs. So, working that graveyard shift and cranking out widgets. And so I do have actual background, but I do want to say, as I put that first thing in the chat, I am an enthusiast, not an expert. I don't have formal education. I don't have research to share with you today. This is just, from my experience, and I'm looking forward to, hearing from you all and seeing what experiences and what questions that you have come up against. So I'm going to launch into these slides, and you know what? I'm going to stop closing. I'm going to stop sharing. Close. How do I stop sharing? Okay, stop sharing. It's a button that says stop sharing because I need to actually have, because I have animations. So, all right, now let's see if this will work better. I apologize. All right, now I can use my lovely animations.
Okay.
So here we go. The first thing is remembering that these are people, and they're not robots, and so that we are designing for people. And this is kind of one of my soapboxes, so I'll move on from that real quick. They have lives like we do, and they have preferences and acclivities just like we do. These are necessary jobs. And this is something that sometimes especially during the pandemic, I thought about, who can we not do without? I can't do without the guy who drives the garbage truck. He's a guy. I know women do that work too, but from my neighborhood, it's a man. People who do construction work, people who do work in the utilities. So these are very necessary jobs. And this is a statistic that I found. This is a U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it's a little old, but from 2017, 5 years ago. But they estimate that more than 70% of workers cannot work remotely. So more than 70% of people are not sitting in front of a computer in an office or at a desk at home or in a coffee shop. More than 70% of people cannot. And even if it's different because of the pandemic, it's still probably more than half. So if we're not creating training for these workers at their jobs, we're missing a huge audience. It also, I mean, it depends on what businesses want to, where they want to allocate their training efforts and money. I can tell you when I worked in the laboratory, what my training was. When we got a new machine, a chemistry or a blood count analyzer, your training was, okay, here, read the quick start guide. Here, I'm the supervisor. I'm going to show you, I'm going to run a few samples through. Okay, here's a rack of samples. You run them through. I'm watching you. Let's check your results. Okay, good. Sign here. You're trained. And if something goes wrong, it's on you. And that was our training. And it was appropriate. It was very practical, and you got what you needed to know, and then you picked up the rest along the way as far as maintaining the machine, and you already had your science background to rely on. But I mean, the training needs for people in line work, I would call it, are different, but they still exist. We got to think about the environment that they work in, that it might be noisy. There might be a lot of distractions. Now, it might not be a clean environment. Now, some factories are very clean. I mean, they polish their floors. It's amazing, and all of the Six Sigma and the lean manufacturing and the standards that they have today is wonderful. But we have to remember the actual environment that the person works in, not just where they're taking their training. So if they go off to a class, they go off to a kiosk to do computer-based training, that's not their actual work environment. So if we're talking about their work tasks, then we need to keep that in mind as far as what will resonate with them and what their real world is. It's like, oh my goodness, here's from Joe. It's from a tweet today. Taught skills related to subjects for military personnel. You'd be hard push explanation, demonstration, imitation, and practice. That is wonderful. And isn't that how we do our courses ideally? I mean, so we give some background information, or we can do the Kathy Moore thing and throw them in at the deep end to prove their need. That's more likely maybe in soft skills, and maybe less in blue collar work. I don't know. What do you think, Luis?
Well, I wanted to say, the example that I would have is a personal sort of experience. I worked for an insulated glass company for like 8 years, back when I was in college. And so, my experience working inside the office in the inside sales environment where everything was air conditioned and any training that happened in there was really simple and easy, and within a much like I don't know, a softer environment than going out into the shop where you constantly hear the sound of broken glass. And, and there are huge pieces of, like $1 million pieces of equipment that are, churning out like glass shapes and fabricating windows, and just the sound is so loud. But I used to actually have to write the training before I knew even that instructional design existed. I would have to write the training for a lot of these guys out there on working some of this machinery. And yeah, the environment was completely different than if I were actually inside the office and had to teach somebody how to use Windows 98 or Windows XP, which I also did that too. So yeah, it's very different. It's very relevant as far as the environment is concerned.
Yeah, very true. Louise, please break in anytime. It's just
Sure.
like, I don't have a talk. I'm just shooting from the hip here.
Yeah. No, I love it. Love it.
The language and the jargon for a technical job has to be right, or they won't trust you. They won't trust you. And that's going to differ for every company, and maybe, different plants in the same parent organization, different plants will have. You just never tell. Of course, there might be official language that needs to be used. But boy, oh, hello. We've got some new people here. This is so nice. But that jargon and being able to write in the terms that the workers need. That's really important. And I'm not sure, but what subject matter experts, they might think a little differently. And so you might have to do a little massaging and a little explaining to get your subject matter experts to understand how the workers need to be addressed. And please understand, I don't mean any of these terms in a pejorative manner. I'm just, as a convenience using these terms. Everybody is a worker, and but it's just a convenience. And this is it's a little dangerous to have Kim shooting from the hip.
No,
um,
totally. And I can sort of back that up with, like, when I, like, Bridget saying, getting the terminology is so important to building trust
mhm,
with learners. And in the environment that I worked in, I would say that 90% of the workers on the floor were Hispanic, right? And so they all spoke Spanish. and
yeah.
and so when I would create training, I would have to, bring somebody in and just help with translation and to work on that. And also, the way that they wanted to be able to train one another was probably different than how I would want to do it. But they had there was a culture there that was a little different.
Mhm,
And it was also because the materials we're working on were dangerous. It was, if you did not know how to work with glass, carry glass correctly, do things like that, it could potentially be fatal. So they were really, really particular about how to train each other, and I needed to be able to grasp that to properly
mhm.
make the training stick in something that they would use over and over, which we just kept in like these big black binders.
That that is excellent, and what a fabulous resource they had in having you, who could do the bilingual training. I mean,
Yeah.
I hope they recognize that. So, um, it's being, and then you mentioned culture. And culture, I have another point about culture, a couple of, I think, on the next slide, but culture is so important. And if you do have different cultures, especially shift workers, sometimes, day shift will have a certain culture, and then afternoon shift, and then graveyard shift, night shift, there will be a difference in culture. And sometimes there's even a pecking order amongst people. And, training can probably, this is something that we can help people see themselves as more of a cohesive team and not have that inner shift rivalry, although that human nature is what it is. And I very much agree, Laura, with what you've said. This all impacts cognitive load. We don't want to have any unnecessary stuff in training where it's just funny, because I think so often we think that people who, maybe they're less intelligent, but no, maybe it's just what they enjoy doing.
Mhm.
Maybe it's what opportunities that they have had, other
Mhm.
circumstances in their life. Maybe it's a phase of their life. And
Mhm.
I know that, like, looking back on the jobs that I have had, I mean, and I'm sure you probably agree, Luis, that the things that we've done before, they inform our training and what we do now, by being able to put ourselves in those shoes.
Right. Right. Oh,
Merrill's first principle theory. I have no idea what that is.
yeah, we'll have to look that up. Thanks for that, Laura. Let's I'm going to go ahead
Okay,
and
well,
I'm going to
if,
copy that one and have that one to look at later. No, and it's true, because I used to I also used to manage a video store, totally dating myself, but I used to manage a video store and had to create the training for that. So that's very different than like doing a video store where I had high schoolers and college kids that I was working with, checking videos in and out, versus working in a
mm,
warehouse
mm,
with these huge pieces of glass that we had to fabricate. So yeah,
well,
definitely.
and when we're saying shop floor, that doesn't necessarily mean just in a warehouse or a manufacturing plant. This could be like any kind of blue collar manual labor setting. It's
Mhm.
it applies way farther than that. So
Mhm.
let's see. I did want to say that we need, many times you need to include everything and you can't assume. Hi, Lisa, good to see you. Um, and that's something that it might have legal implications as far as what needs to be included. I mean, I've just done some especially safety type training. Whereas like, because if somebody can say you didn't train me, then there are things that they're not responsible for.
Mhm.
So of course we had somebody at one of my jobs that even though you train the person, they would say, I didn't know that. And, and the excuse, it's like, oh my goodness. But you always get those kind of people in every field.
Right.
Um, so not assuming necessarily that the person either knows something or can connect one thing with another, to make things very clear, but yet you don't want to talk down to people because they'll sense that just the same as you would.
Mhm.
Um, my next point, whoops, to be curious about the worker's world and to see through their eyes. I mean, if you have the opportunity, like Luis did, to actually go out into the plant or out into the warehouse floor or into a different area, what a resource that is, because you can see it yourself. If you're a consultant like me, I'm going more by what I imagine or what I can remember. You got anything on that, Luis?
Yeah, I'm curious about your how you relate to this because you're right. I was right there in the shop. I could just go out and basically it was sort of, when I'd have to do like a task analysis type of thing, right? I could sit there and I could hang out for, an entire day just watching somebody like seal a window and make sure that I have every single step documented so that
Mhm.
then I could transfer it into a written document. But in your case, like, what's that process like when you have to assign yourself this task of like, seeing through their eyes? What tell me how you work through that.
And of course, I'm speaking as an enthusiast and not an
Uh-huh.
expert, and I can only speak for me. But I do draw on my background as far as, because by the time I graduated from college, I had had like 20 jobs,
Mhm.
all different kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And so I remember my own experience, and I'm sorry. um, and um, And then also, I am if the client has the documents they give us, if they come from like their technical writers, they're that the people at their people at the company, and they have been doing exactly what you said, Luis. And so I am counting on them. I'm also counting on my imagination. I did one course that was about it was related to the mining industry, and I went out on YouTube and these mines, they have
Uh,
like let me take you on a truck and tour you through our mine, and you're watching the people do the work, and in their actual, because they're proud of their work, as they should be. Every worker should be proud of their work and making a contribution to civilization as a whole. And so you might be able to find something like that, but I think the key is not assuming that your stakeholders on the learning project, whether they're an L&D department or even line of business people, even the person's first, their manager, that person that they report to is not necessarily going to see it the same as the worker themselves. So
right.
it does require, that empathy and a little bit of imagination, and then all you can do is do your best.
So how often do you work like if you are doing shop floor training, do you ever work with SMEs yourself?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, not face to face. It's always, over the phone or Zoom or something like that. I think a couple of times if it's local, but I don't really travel to, and our customers are all over the place. Our video people do go to the sites, and sometimes they can bring back, good information, but that's after the project. Usually I'm done with it. So.
Right. And so tell me, just can you describe a little bit of what your interaction is like when you're working with an SME that isn't a job, that is like, somebody that is where you're creating, like warehouse or shop floor training?
Hmm. I wish I'd have an example that I can share with you.
Hmm.
Um, I'm it's not always important to know, things like, how far are the machines from each other, what's the decibel level, or I'm more thinking about motivation and what do they really need to know
Hmm.
in order to do the job, and as opposed to what's nice to know, which is what subject matter experts, they always want, all this extraneous stuff that is going to be, as someone has said here, more cognitive load, and the learner won't know anything. I
Hmm.
find that's the thing that comes up the most often, is having to educate my subject matter experts about cognitive load, and what can you expect the learner to walk away with. And
Hmm.
that's true whether it's e-learning or if it's instructor-led training. I have come across times where um, the this how can I say this? Uh, Sometimes when a person is doing instructor-led training, and this is true with soft skills, or even if you've been in a workshop or something like that, and the person who is leading it knows the material so well that they think they've said things that they actually haven't said. And they're counting on people to have read their slides, or they're counting on people to make a leap between points. Maybe they're giving too much detail on one thing to really emphasize it, but then they're skipping other things that are maybe more critical to the worker. Um, and I just forgot. I just thought of another really good point. Oh well, I'm not meant to say that. It was actually from an ATD meeting, something that came up, and now I'm forgetting it. But it, it's it is putting things together,
Right.
and reading between the lines, formulating good questions, because you don't want your subject matter expert to, you don't want to put them off, or them think that their contribution is not important, but you need to collaborate, and sometimes that involves a little education.
It's
Yeah.
true. And, I think Danny has a great point here. Danny's saying context, culture, and empathy matter when workers are being trained on site. They need to feel understood and respected.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's on the trainers to recognize that and to build trust. And I know that for myself, even when I was creating training for these folks, like the people that I would, of course, like have review what I would come up with were the people that were actually doing the training on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And and so I would have to I would definitely felt like empathy was incredibly important, like being able to understand their role, how they relate to the other workers that are coming in, and just even
Mm-hmm.
where this training is going to be applied during their daily work, because these guys have so much to do on any given day, and
Mm-hmm.
actually training is one of the last things that they really want to deal with. And
Yeah.
so yeah, that empathy piece, I think, is really important. That speaks to the slide appropriately.
I think that, oh, definitely, you are spot on, and we even do that on not just us at Cinecraft, but everybody in our field. We need to do that kind of thing on every project when we're dealing with, subject matter experts, and asking them to review our drafts of things or our alphas of our courses, because that's not their main job. And so we're just applying that same principle to getting our source information from the subject matter experts. One thing I did want to say, and this is back from my hospital days, I worked in several hospitals, or 3 hospitals, and this was basically true at all of them. And I have been out of that field for over 20 years. So that I need to say that my knowledge is not current. And things might be different now, but it was very consistent. we who worked in a more production-oriented department, we would look at people who took the leadership and communication skills classes and the people who led that training. We would think, well, somebody has to teach these people how to be a nice person. So, and they're going to a communications skills class so that they can learn how to manipulate us. And so if you are out there from a learning and development department, interacting with people on a shop floor or warehouse or some kind of an environment like that, just something to keep back in the back of your mind, that they might have a negative connotation of you that you don't even know of and you don't deserve. But it's important to build that trust, as we've been talking about, trust with the end learner, but also trust with the people who are giving you the information. Or it's a different thing, and I can say that I have no idea if that is true in business. It has not come up on any Cinecraft project or when I was a technical writer, but it was definitely true when I worked in healthcare, that type of work.
Right. I mean, and I hate to say it, and this has been, mentioned like tons before in other casts, but just like when you're trying to relate with other departments, IT or whatever, bring donuts or a big bag of M&Ms or something like that. Cause I know that's what I would have to do before I get started. Cause some of these guys that I would work with were not exactly like, the nicest people in the world. Like a few of them were kind of alpha and so I'd have to be able to get on their good side to be able to get like some decent task analysis done. But yeah,
that's true. When I was a tech writer, I mean, you always wanted to give people, the IT department, you give them food. And also I found that if there was a way that I could present, what I was trying to do in a way that it would make them think that it would make them look good in the end, that this will make you look good, then that was also helpful in getting information. And I wouldn't do anything that wasn't truthful. So, I have my integrity, but so to me, it's kind of not manipulating. It's just presenting something in the best light that you can.
Sure.
So, I think that humanizing or reflecting, that's a very good way to put it. Although people are already humans, but we're remembering that they're humans. And that's good. This is a point that I wanted to bring up. It's the technique-dependent tasks that lead to a sense of mastery and job fulfillment. This is true in our field. I mean, whether you're working in the authoring tools or whether you are good at writing, like my role would be, or whatever. But this is also true, certainly in our more blue-collar manual labor type of fields. It's the technique-dependent tasks that lead to a sense of mastery and fulfillment for them. So they want to be masters. Of course, sometimes they think they have a little bit more mastery, and then we need to have people unlearn things. But how often do businesses want to eliminate technique-dependent tasks? This is something, and I'm not saying this is something that I've just noticed in the news probably for 20 or 30 years. And this is not anything of a project that we've done at Cinecraft. But you see that we want to dumb it down. We want to make it idiot-proof. And that language lets me know that whoever is saying it thinks of that worker as potentially an idiot.
Right.
And that is not a message that we would ever want to send. I don't know. It's just this is a little bit of Kim's soapbox, and I'm a little controversial here. And emphasize not Cinecraft. I've seen this for decades, in the news. But what we are teaching people is their technique-dependent tasks and something that will lead them to job fulfillment. So I think that's another motivator for us. So I'm going to move off of this because it's like
well, no, and it's so important because when it comes down to it, when you're on the floor and you're working, you just want to be able to pretty much get through your day and go home and live your life, right? I mean, it's not,
Mhm.
and so you want to have mastery over things. And if you're trying to, train a new employee or onboarding somebody, if you have the right materials to help them succeed, it's just going to make, you know, um, the trainer's job that much easier. And so of course you want to be able to hand over something that will help them all succeed. And yeah, so I totally, I like this slide.
Yeah, it's something to at least keep in the back of our mind, because the thing is that these are the kind of tasks that companies also want to automate, and workers know that they might be replaced by a robot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it just helps us to understand how to interact, how to empathize, and what tone to take, so
Mm-hmm.
that we're not condescending, we're respecting them and saying your work is valuable, just even in our whole approach. All right, let's go. It's like jobs I would like to do is not equal good jobs. This is a little bit of, I have seen this um, in just social media for our field. It's sometimes people, they really only want to create training for jobs that they themselves would like to do, because those are the good jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And like we said, 60% of the people or more don't work in front of a computer. And I was really, I was really, I was at Thanksgiving dinner at a friend's house, and she's a school teacher, a high school teacher. And she's telling me about her school and how they're so proud of the percentage of their graduates that go on to college. And I said, this is somebody I know in my personal life, is not a work colleague at all. And be like, well, there are lots of good jobs that don't require college. And I am not even making this up. She looks at me, oh yeah, a lot of kids go into those lesser jobs. And I would think, and if I was not at your home and you weren't hosting me, I might have something more to say about that. But I just left it as is. I, I'm To me, it seemed arrogant.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, those are not lesser jobs. Those are necessary jobs. Those are the jobs that still went on during the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
when a lot of people were furloughed, or their jobs changed. The people still were in the grocery store.
Right.
I saw a video last night that Starbucks only closed for 4 weeks during COVID. And it Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. What we
Yeah.
need to remember is diversity. What seems like a good job to you is not necessarily a good job to somebody else. Somebody's going to be very proud that they have that job that you
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't really want to do. Well, they have a right to be proud. They're making a contribution to society, and they're making a living, and providing for themselves and their family. They have a right to be proud. And this is another area of diversity, the same as um, race, gender,
Mm-hmm.
religion, socioeconomic level, education level. It's the same thing. Different people like different jobs, and we should be happy about that. And I know I'm age also. Yes, yeah, I'm old. But and that's something that we can, whether or not we actually would say that, which probably wouldn't happen, we can keep that in the back of our mind as we're designing. And it does to me. I'm always thinking about this. It's yet another part um, of empathy. Oh, young, like teenage, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, so I don't know. Luis, you want to say anything about that? It's kind of
Well, I'm just
it's kind of out
I'm
there.
still I'm stuck on Bridget's comment here where Bridget says part of the joy of being an instructional designer is the power to dignify all types of work. I think that's
Ah,
beautiful. I just took a
I
screenshot of that
love
and I'll probably share it in the
I
next
love
newsletter or
that.
something. Yeah, no,
I,
that's great, Bridget, because it's true. I think,
mhm.
well, I'm sure many of you know I come from my dad was a farmer and that used to harvest just vegetables here on the west coast of California and so I would go with him to work sometimes and just watch people, cutting celery from the ground, all day, like 5 days a week, just like this backbreaking work, cutting lettuce or, picking onions, doing things like that. And that is tough, tough, tough work. But that, they were still like, I mean, had still had joy, like the way that they would play with me like at lunchtime and I would get to run around and do all of that. It was still amazing. And when we'd get together with everybody on the weekends, it was still like incredible. And so, that
Mhm.
that sort of speaks to when you are creating this kind of training, just keeping this in mind, that have some empathy for the type of work that these people are wanting to succeed in.
Absolutely. Well, and Luis, you got to know that you brought them joy too by being there. So it's
Yeah.
not a surprise to me that you would have fun. I
Yeah.
mean, so I tell you, sometimes I have such cognitive overload in my job, which I'm so thankful we're so busy. But I'm thinking, look, going out and pulling weeds all day, that sounds like a good job to me.
Right. Right. No, it's true. It's true.
Oh, yeah. Actually, I was thinking of going with volunteer work, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I can join the handyman ministry so I can like paint and drive nails. That
Hmm.
sounds like a good thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oh, let's see what Joe's sharing. When she worked for Time Warner, she wanted to run training for the broadcast team overnight. Oh, yeah. That's true. And how often businesses, whether it's, I mean, this had happened in healthcare, they'll have trouble training third shift employees or second shift employees. Because like if you put it the end of first shift and the beginning of second shift, you're missing the third shift. And then do they get, and nobody wanted to come in at like, 6 o'clock in the morning and train the third shift people. And so that is definitely a good point. And something else. I mean, if we are creating training that is, live training, how do we adapt for that? How do we need to adapt for a shift audience? Um, so
Yeah.
anyway, I
So, Kim, I'm not sure how much you got on slides, but I do have a few questions that I wouldn't mind that are probably, they're definitely related, but sort of a bit of a segue.
good.
Um,
I have only one more slide, and that is that I wanted to remind everybody about my favorite book here, The Shift, how seeing people as people, it does change everything. And, really most of us, it probably already does, but then we can walk that out as we design training for workers who have jobs that are different from ours.
mhm.
So, and I don't have the link to that. Kimberly White, The Shift, it's on Amazon and every place else. So I'm sorry I don't have the link. So, but anyway, that was
No.
all I had. So let's go to questions.
Okay, I
Where's my
got just a
cursor?
few questions here. How about the difference between technical writing and writing for instructional design?
Oh, yeah, because I've done both. And
Mhm.
evidently so has Luis. So um, uh, it's very related, but it's different. Of course, technical writing, you're not worried about seat time. Um, you're worried more about, am I getting the steps in order? And is my subject matter giving me the steps in actual order? And some of you have probably heard me give the example before where I worked at a Fortune 500 company. My subject matter expert, she's in Mensa. She's in the IT department. She's a brilliant woman. And she says, okay, all you'll have to do is just, put some formatting on it. It'll be good to go. And I got like 40 steps. And at the bottom in big red letters, it says, but first, before you do anything else, you need to blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, is this a bridal shower? You know, so I just had to go over him very politely and meekly say, well, would it be okay if I made that step one? And then she's like, oh yeah, sure, that's great. You know, but they don't necessarily think of stuff, your technical people, they don't think of it in the way that the worker or the learner or the person who's using the documentation needs it. In documentation, it needs to be more complete, absolutely complete. Whereas for us, if we cover our learning objectives, that's good. But something, we would shove a lot of stuff over into a job aid if it didn't fit into a course. And if it was something that they would have to look up later. Well, technical writing, they're always going to be looking it up later. They're going to be consuming those software tutorials, or a walkthrough. They're going to do it at need rather than, as a part of getting trained. Might be part of their training. And I'm sure you all have times where things that are in the online help are part of your source material, or you're referring people to it. So I don't know. What do you think?
Well, that's fascinating. I think that we could probably have an individual episode just about this, right now.
Well,
'Cause
and actually, we had an intersections where
right.
Jen Yaros, who's also at Cinecraft, she's another person who came to Cinecraft from Technical Writing Company. I worked there, but our tenures didn't overlap, and so we have that, but there's a lot more, and
Yeah.
it's good to know how to collaborate. Technical writers tend to be more geeky people than we do, and so learning to interact with them, it's kind of like learning to interact with a subject matter expert. They're subject matter experts too, the same as we get to be after we study stuff.
Right. Yeah. And we also did that writing for instructional design series earlier this year that was really, really good that people can go back and review. Now, so last question, just real quick, Kim, when you are writing for instructional design, what kind of tools do you utilize to keep learners engaged?
Well, my role at Cinecraft is that I write, and I describe in a storyboard in Microsoft Word. I describe what I'd like the programmers and the artists to do and the animators. But so I'm just coming up with ideas, and other people make it real. But it's important for me to know what the tools will do and what examples there are out there to follow, which I have trouble keeping up with that because there's so much, and I'm so busy with loading cognitive load with the content. But it's important to if you can have interactivity and let the learner do it themselves, that is good. I will say that I've done a course for for example, for safety in warehouse, where the person is supposed to like measure something. Okay, well here's a little gauge. Drag it over to here, and then you're going to need to drag it to several more places to and then you can move forward and say, okay, here's your measurements. Is this a problem or not? Or you have successfully done this. You need to label this piece of equipment. Here's the label. Click and drag it onto the graphic of the equipment. Try to make it at least a little bit doing virtually of the
Right.
tasks the person would do in the field. I
Yeah.
don't know.
No, they just that
Do you have ideas?
interactivity. Well, like for myself, like when I did it, they're actually, because I think we had such a focus on safety that there wasn't, it was almost like I would say in some ways it was like a life or death situation. You need to just take this material really seriously. Otherwise
Well,
you
yeah.
could I ended up with having to get like 20 something stitches on one hand because
What?
I didn't follow instructions. Yeah, I shouldn't have
Oh
been there anyway.
no.
I was trying to be a part of the of the guys out there, and so I was helping them build some windows, and then some glass cracked on me, but
Oh,
yeah,
oh,
it was
you know, that's another point. You brought up a great point, Lisa, is that when you have, and we've had this happen where we'll have an expert helping us on a video shoot, and they'll do what they commonly do, but it's not really by the book.
mm,
So, you know, they'll take a few shortcuts. And so you have to be careful if you're writing, or especially if you're getting a video of something, that person needs to rein it in a little, and they
yeah,
need to do it by the book.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 No fun. All
It's
right,
funny.
Kim, thank you so much for doing this. I really
Oh,
appreciate it. Great way to wrap up our Friday, and
thank you.
yeah, and let's schedule another one sometime. I'd love to hear from you and anybody else that is out there.
Yeah.
In the TLDC world, if you have any other instructional design topics you'd like to cover. I was just talking to my wife about this over the weekend. So I think we started doing this in 2017. And so it's been over 5 years now that we've been doing TLD casts. And I don't even know how many episodes we have. There's some, like, I think around 800. And it's like, how do you keep coming up with new stuff to talk about? But so, if anyone has any topics or are interested in being a guest on
Mhm,
TLDC, let me know.
mhm,
I would much
definitely.
appreciate it. And with that, I'm going to close it out. Thanks, everybody. Have a great
Thank you.
weekend. And
Thank you.
yeah, we'll see you next week.
Okay, bye.
Bye.